This video might make you take several thousand damage, but it's been on my mind and I need to get it off my chest. The Omegaverse is a wildly used and joked about fanfiction trope dating back to the early 2010s. Some of the earliest identified usages of the Omegaverse trope in fanfiction was actually for fanfictions of the notorious show Supernatural, which does not surprise me even a little bit. If you have not been tainted, I will explain to you what the Omegaverse is. The Omegaverse is an alternate universe in which, on top of the already existing real-life first gender, these fanfiction writers have created essentially a second fake wolf gender and assigned everybody this second fake wolf gender. It's based on the fake wolf designations Alpha, Beta, and Omega, although Beta is selectively used in these Omegaverse fanfictions because I feel like they're either there or they're not. This is based on a real-world scientific theory on wolf behavior that has since been disproven. In the fanfiction world, the alpha is, a dominant, in bed, in the relationship, in society, depending on what type of fanfiction you're reading. The omega is the submissive in the bed, the relationship, or society, depending on the fanfiction that you're reading. Those are the two basic qualities needed to have an Omegaverse fanfiction, is the existence of an alpha and omega, and selectively a beta. So basically, the Supernatural fandom back in the early 2010s made an entire fanfiction universe based around a second fake wolf gender based on a disproven scientific wolf behavior theory. God, I'm about to say so many blasphemous words in this video. The rules of this universe range drastically depending on who's writing it. With that being established, to sort of give context for this video, to sort of defend myself, my coworker and I, a millennial woman that's into fandom spaces, she's super cool, but we sort of fell into the topic of the Omegaverse, and we were sort of critiquing it, some of our gripes with it, and she had some very good points, I had some very good add-ons. We both agreed that it was overdone and essentially being beaten like a dead horse, but we had some critiques of the general structure of these fanfictions that I thought were very interesting and wanted to share. Now, mind you, I have not read an Omegaverse fanfiction of my own volition since I was a child, and by child I mean a teenager of 15 years old. I'm sure the Omegaverse fanfictions have potentially evolved, I'd like to think, since 2016, but I'm also sure that some of the old shenanigans still remain, so I would not be too surprised if this really doesn't deviate much at all from the shit I was reading in 2016. I personally just don't hate myself enough to subject myself to modern day Omegaverse fanfiction. I think I need to draw the line somewhere, and unblocking that tag on AO3 is where I draw the line. So I chose for my own peace not to investigate. However, like I said, some of the shenanigans probably remain, but my coworker and I's critiques are as follows. Some writers of the Omegaverse trope write it in a really rapey way that is a direct mirror to real-life purity culture. Some writers of the Omegaverse trope somehow abolish the first gender that we have in real life, and yet somehow militantly enforce this second gender that they have created out of fake wolf genders, which I personally believe lacks imagination and moxie. Some Omegaverse writers, cishet women in particular, use the Omegaverse as an excuse to essentially write gay relationships through a straight lens. They straight your gaze. The Omegaverse recreates the patriarchy, but for the second gender, which kind of encompasses all of my past points and summarizes them. Nicholas, let people enjoy things, Nicholas. I will have you know, much like the famous tweet says, that I enjoy being a hater. I like critiquing things. I will critically examine things that do not matter to cope with reality, and you cannot stop me. When I was a teenager, the Omegaverse bothered me, and I didn't have the words to verbally express why, just due to the lack of understanding of the structures that be in the real world. But now that I have those words and I can properly put it into nice little bullet points for myself, I am going to express my discomfort. Before I move on, I would like to give a verbal trigger warning. I will not be going in depth, but I will be mentioning some rapey purity culture themes throughout this video, some patriarchy nonsense. If that makes you uncomfortable, I guess you could skip this first point, or you can just click out the video altogether. Don't stay if it's going to make you too uncomfortable. Okay, first and foremost, the purity culture. Now, applications of the Omegaverse trope vary so greatly, this cannot apply to every fan fiction that's ever been written ever. That is my disclaimer. But it is a common theme that I've seen that does lend into my overall thesis about the Omegaverse just sort of recreating the patriarchy for a second gender. Now, it's important to note that purity culture is not just society telling people that they cannot be promiscuous outside of marriage. Purity culture is a hatred of all non-traditional sex, but purity culture is also rape culture, because a fundamental tenet of purity culture is the idea that a teenage girl can be married off to this grown-ass 30-year-old man, and he will use her as a sex object to keep him from sinning or having sex outside of marriage or doing things that would be frowned upon within religion. It's basically an allowance of marital rape and an objectification of a usually teenage girl victim. Purity culture kind of bleeds into these Omegaverse fanfictions at times, but it spans gender. One thing these fanfictions do is that some of them somehow abolish first gender, but then militantly enforce the second Omegaverse gender of Alpha, Beta, and Omega, which I will talk a little bit more about later, but the purity culture does span gender, or at least the first gender, meaning man, woman, non-binary, etc. Here's some examples of what I mean by that. I've seen stuff where, like, if an Omega is bitten by an Alpha, the Omega is sort of forced to become their mate and essentially marry them because they've been claimed and they have no other choice. This is, once again, regardless of your first reality gender. I've seen other stuff where, like, an Omega sleeps with an Alpha and then other Alphas will not touch them or go near them because they have been tainted and claimed by another Alpha. Sometimes, in the worst case scenario, Omegas are married off to Alphas without their say, and they essentially become this sexual object to the Alpha without any say in the matter. It's shit like that that comes way too close to real life purity culture for me that I don't feel comfortable reading it. And I'm sure some women watching this that have experienced this kind of shit in real life probably don't feel comfortable with that either. Just because it does feel like a direct parallel of purity culture with, the first gender in real life. Next point, and the one I've mentioned before, it's somehow, and in a lot of these Omegaverse fanfictions, they manage to abolish the first gender only to militantly enforce the second gender. While there are some fics that deviate from this, it's a common theme that all Omegas can get pregnant, regardless of whether or not you're a man or a woman, whatever that means in this context. In fact, a lot of fics say women can be alphas, men can be Omegas, men can be with men, women can be with women. These fics manage to abolish traditional first gender, and they also manage to abolish at times, depending on the writer, even sexuality based on that traditional first gender. It would be interesting if they didn't militantly enforce the second gender after doing that. In these fics, if you are an Omega, you're an Omega. If you're an Alpha, you're an Alpha. There is no changing your assigned second gender at birth. I have not seen a fic, and this could be because I haven't read them in the past few years, that manages to sort of incorporate a transgender type deal, but with your second gender. Like you're assigned Omega at birth, but you want to become an Alpha, so you go on second gender HRT or something. That'd be kind of swag. But I haven't seen that because the second gender is this sort of pushed as this immutable fact. Because of that, it just hits way too close to home regarding trans people and the first gender, because that excuse is always bioessentialism bullshit. You're an Omega because biologically you're an Omega. You're Alpha because you're biologically an Alpha. And this is what, gender criticals and TERFs use to, hate on trans people. So that kind of shit hits way too close to home. You made a second gender, but now you're kind of doing odd gender critical shit with the second gender, the second wolf gender that doesn't exist. Additionally, there's always behavior or traditional gender roles assigned to these fake second genders, aside from the biological sex aspect of these second genders, which all kind of roll into this weird gender critical turfy aspect. I just get bad vibes. I get bad vibes about it. You can't trans an Omega to an Alpha because the way that this second gender is described, explicitly states it's a biological thing, which leans itself heavily into that bioessentialism that I'm critiquing here. I think if somebody were to write somebody transing their, second fake wolf gender in the Omegaverse, I think that would be kind of subversive. I won't lie. That would be creative as hell. And you could make a statement on real life politics with your fake wolf gender fanfiction. Fake wolf gender HRT kind of sounds dope as hell. Get on that. Nicholas, wolves don't have gender. They only have bioessentialism. Okay, and we're talking about humans with fake wolf genders in a fake universe right now. The wolf genders in real life have been scientifically disproven. I'm sure you can buckle the fuck up and trans your wolf gender. You won't die. The next point, cishet women try to use the Omegaverse as an excuse to essentially straight your gay relationship. Now, disclaimer, and I feel like I have to make this very, very clear, this is not saying that a masculine top gay man and a feminine bottom gay man together is a straight baiting gay relationship. If you ever go up to a real gay couple like that and say something like that, I will be in your walls. I will be in your walls. It's not mice, it's me. I'm in your fucking walls. Please be for fucking real right now. No, that's not my problem, and that's not how I identify if a straight woman has written one of these fan fictions. The problem I have becomes extremely apparent when you take these two gay male characters and you force them into traditional real-life gender roles. It's the gender role issue that's the problem for me. You can tell because the relationship functions, how a straight relationship functions, through the lens of a cishet woman. And this is much easier for them to do when the gender roles are strictly created by this fake second gender. Okay, you've abolished the first gender, I guess, but now you've created this second gender where you've forced one gay man into the woman role and one gay man into the man role of the relationship, and just sort of recreated the patriarchy, but with gay men. They will explicitly write this gay couple so that the Omega, one of them, would be in charge of getting pregnant, having pups, doing the housework and essentially just pleasing the alpha and being there to be a sexual object, all while the alpha provides for the traditional relationship and then doesn't ask for consent. I'm gonna be real with you right now. I would be annoyed if you wrote a straight couple in the Omegaverse like that. What makes you think I feel better that you've turned the woman into a man? Did the Omegaverse writer girl boss, when she recreated patriarchal gender roles and yet swapped the woman out with the man so she can be a weird fetishizer? Was this a feminism win? To tie it all together here, the Omegaverse was and still is deeply uncomfortable for me because it feels like an excuse to just recreate the patriarchy but with like a second fake wolf gender. I think there are ways of getting creative with it and beating these allegations, but I have, for a majority of these works, have not seen that being put into action because the entire thing just seems like a wolf patriarchy fetish. You can only save this trope by transing your second wolf gender and putting them on second wolf gender HRT. None of the words I said in this video are in the Bible.